Hello, today we're going to talk about the topic of persecution. You might think of the word persecution and think, well, that's something from like church history, like the book of Acts or something like that. And that's true. But on the other hand, it happens today. You might think of your Muslim friend who or person who left Islam to join the Christian faith, to become a Christian, a disciple of Jesus, and think, well, they would have persecution if they were fill in the blank in Pakistan or Egypt or Yemen. And that's also true. However, persecution also happens even for converts in the West, and might make a different video for people who are actually in those countries that have Islamic or Sharia governments. The situation is significantly different there. The first thing that I would like to say is that if you have a friend who has converted from Islam to Christianity, who is thinking about doing it, they have to be very careful with how they share that information with their family. And this doesn't specifically have to do with Islam or Christianity, but anytime that you give people a huge, jarring piece of news about a decision that you're making or something you're thinking of doing, oftentimes people will just freak out and, it can be very negative. So a good example of someone who had to tell a person a big piece of news and who did it in a gradual and wise manner is Esther. Esther, was married to the king. The king doesn't know that she's a Jewess. So instead of saying, "Hey, don't kill all the Jews. I'm Jewish," she, gradually has these meals with him and prepares him so that when the right time comes, he's able to hear this news and to receive it. So it's one thing to be persecuted for our faith in Christ. It's another thing to get in trouble with our families or for your Muslim friends or your ex Muslim friends to get in trouble with their families because they're just blatant or offensive. I knew one young guy who just came out and said, "I'm a Christian. I don't like Muhammad. I don't believe in the Quran." I'm like, there are ways to say these things that are less likely to get you a really bad reaction. So that's the first point. Your Christian friend who comes from a Muslim background should be careful with sharing with their family. On the other hand, it's really not over the long term a viable option to simply keep that a secret forever. When I'm working with Christians who came from a Muslim background, I say, I'm not going to tell you whether you have to tell them today or in a year, but what is not an option is to just keep it a secret forever. So the second thing that I want to say, and even for the United States, this is true in the Muslim world, but it's also true in the United States and here in Europe, where I live right now, is have a backup place, especially for young women. Especially for young women, if that uncle or grandfather or dad or brother gets in there and he just feels angry and violent, and he can just snap like that, make sure that you have a place for that young lady to stay. Now, in the Muslim world, these are called safe houses, and these don't exist to the same extent in the United States, although there are some, usually for people who have been victims of human trafficking, actually, and forced prostitution. But make sure that you have, a room, a guest room at some person, maybe a family member of yours, maybe yourself, even if it's just a living room where she can come in and stay there for 2 or 3 days. Most people, you have someone at your church who's a trusted family or a trusted couple, and they have a guest room where she can stay. But the point is, you want to know this beforehand. You don't want to be running around at the last minute trying to figure this stuff out. So be prepared, have a plan beforehand. And the thing is with persecution, you can have long periods where things appear to be kind of okay and fine, and then something snaps, and all of a sudden she can't stay at the family home anymore, and she's got to leave, and she maybe didn't even bring her things with her. This happens in the United States. This happens in Spain. This happens in Germany and Denmark. This happens outside of the Muslim world. It happens a lot inside the Muslim world, but it happens everywhere. In terms of persecution, a third point is we should recognize that normally there are two kind of directions that persecution takes. One is called persecution from above. So this is when the government or the religious authorities are going to persecute a people or a person, or indeed a people, like a group of like a community, a group of people. This in the United States is not going to be so common. It's not common here in Spain. If a Muslim decides to become a Christian, the government really doesn't care. Um, But in the United States, it usually doesn't matter unless you live in a neighborhood or a city that is basically run by Muslims. And nowadays, there are entire townships in the United States that are basically run by Muslims. So you could actually have persecution from above. We have entire neighborhoods in parts of London and parts of different cities of Germany, Oslo, for example, in Scandinavia. These basically they people are supposed to have constitutional human rights and stuff like that, but if the local government is run by Muslims, that's usually not going to be the case. It's not always, but usually not going to be the case. But the main kind of persecution that your Muslim ex-Muslim friend is going to face is persecution from below. That is from their family, and again, it can be slow, like gradual persecution, like, oh, you broke your grandmother's heart, I can't believe it, and it can be that kind of slow grinding, um, just manipulation, really, or it can be something that is much more. You got to get out of the house, get out of here. We never want to see you. You don't belong to this family. Both of these things can happen. And then finally, this is my last point: is when you have a friend who came from Islam to Christianity, you and your church, you have to be their new family. Their parents, their siblings are probably not going to talk to them oftentimes for years and years and years, sometimes never again in their life. Are there some like very secular Muslim families that are very modern and respect people's choices? There are, but that is not the norm. Even in the United States, even for people who seem very secular, work in the secular world, women don't wear the hijab, but still just renouncing Islam and especially turning to the Christian faith and to Jesus is considered beyond the pale. So anyway, those are just some brief points about persecution and your Christian friend who's a convert from Islam. Thank you.